Hey, do you want to get married? I don't know. You might want to. No, today we're going to talk about marrying whiskey. Let's get into it. All right, so we all know how whiskey is made, right? You put distilled stuff into a barrel and let it sit. And then, unless you're releasing a single barrel product, you have to blend that said whiskey back together. On my podcast, I've talked to multiple blenders about blending and the process of blending. But when I did a recent podcast with H.K. Young, he sent over this sample, and I'm very gracious for it for two reasons. For one, the whiskey's great. For two, this was right when they dumped it into the blending tank. We're going to talk about that for a second too. They dumped it into the blending tank, then he pulled the sample. So what had happened is all the whiskey that they dumped in, it just swirls around and gets all discombobulated or whatever you want to call it. And when he pulled it off, I gave a tasting note or whatever on it, and he's like, "That's strange. Why did you get that?" And so then he sent a full bottle of the actual blended product that was going to market, and it was drastically different. It was drastically different. So I did a full review of that bottle. So go check that out. But I wanted to do kind of a whiskey 101 about marrying tanks and blending tanks, marrying vats, whatever you want to call them. People call them different things. I have another example here of what they call a marrying cask, and this is Compass Box. I just released a podcast with them as well. This is a Scotch whiskey, which is a single marrying cask. So this is what they call. This would be the closest thing in Scotch that you're going to get to a single barrel. So this was an ex-Linkwood barrel. Yeah, barrel number 246. No, cask number 169. This is bottle 246. And so what they did is this is a blended whiskey, right? They had the blend, and then they stuck it in another barrel and let it marry in there. That's super cool, right? So Scotland has different ways of doing it, obviously, than America. But in America, we have these big blending tanks. Sometimes they're wood, sometimes they're stainless steel, some of them are copper. It doesn't matter what they are. Obviously, some are going to impart flavor as well. So you don't really want that if you're trying to get a blended product back together. So basically, you stick it in there, let it sit, right? And just let it mellow and let all the things get cohesive, because the sample of HK Young that I got was actually a proof point and a half lower. I said it, lower than the actual bottle. Now, why is that? Well, maybe the sample they pulled out of was from a different proof barrel, right? Because when you dump 200 barrels or however many they have, you dump them all in a tank, it finds its level before it totally blends out. That's what I kind of think. I don't know if that was the case or not, but the proof is different than the actual bottle proof. So now the proof isn't going to rise, right? Unless it's evaporating water off, which I don't think they are. So it had to have been, it was pulled from a specific part of a specific barrel. So really cool, really interesting. But one of the advantages of doing like a marrying vat or a marrying barrel is it evens out the differences of said whiskey, right? As we were talking about, it makes it more cohesive. It makes it more blended together, right? Because like when I tell you at home to grab a couple of whiskeys, blend them together, yes, it does taste good. And yes, it is fine. It will work in small quantities. It will work. But you try and do that with barrels of whiskey, they tend to react differently to each other at high quantities, because what happens is, and this is getting nerdy, and I'm sorry, the molecular structure of said whiskey in barrel A and said whiskey in barrel B, this one might be thick, rich, and oily, and this one might be light and thin and even lower proof. So you blend those together and all the molecules go crazy. That's why sometimes when you add water to a whiskey, if you're drinking like a cask strength whiskey or something like that, you add a little water to it, it opens it up. It makes it very vibrant, very ethanol forward sometimes, right? So that's kind of what this has helped mellowing it out. Now, it's not charcoal mellowing, it's not filtering, it's not doing any of those things. It is literally letting the whiskey sit and just calm down after it's had like let's say you took this bottle and you just shook it up and shook it up and shook it up and shook it up. You see how frothy it gets, right? That is the molecules getting all disjointed. So think about it. It's been sitting in a barrel for 6, 8, 10, 12, 30 years. I don't care how many years it's been in a barrel. You dump it out, it's going to go like this. It's going crazy. It needs to mellow and it needs to blend together. That's all it is. So I think it's really cool that Scotch guys do that inside a barrel. So you will get a little bit of influence from that barrel. Like this one was ex-Linkwood, which Linkwood is a Scotch, obviously. It was an ex-Linkwood barrel. So they marry it in there for like months, right? Like 6 months, 8 months, 11 months. I think this one was 11 months. That's really cool. So you're getting almost secondary maturation on it as well, which is really cool. Anyway, I don't want to keep this super long because, how much can you talk about marrying and vatting whiskey? So think about that the next time you pick up a single barrel of a whiskey. That is what it is, right? That's going to be the flavors that are in there. They're not going to change. They might change in the bottle over time due to oxidation or something like that. But when you have a bunch of single barrels and you mix them together, the flavors are going to be all disjointed and they just need time to mellow. So I hope that helps out. And I hope that makes you kind of understand when blending is happening. It's not just for consistency. It's for, you can eke out certain flavors that you want depending upon the barrel as well. So you can add half of a barrel of this one and blah, blah, blah. That gets into blending. So we won't talk about that today. But y'all be good. Be nice to each other. Thank you so much to my sponsors, right? Bad Motivated Barrels, Hinterhouse Distilling, and Z Smith Whiskey and Mixology. And if you would like to support anything I'm doing here, you can go to my YouTube. I have a podcast. I have all the things. Patreon.com/Whiskey Shaman if you want to support monetarily. Y'all be good. Be nice to each other. Until next time, keep your spirits up. Peace.